Welcome back to a brand new deep dive. And, if you're new here, I'm really glad you found your way in today because, well, we are stepping into some truly fascinating territory.
We really are. It's such a unique topic this time.
Yeah, exactly. So today we're focusing on a brilliant excerpt from the Artist Journal podcast, which is produced by Northwind Illustrations. Specifically, it's a piece titled, Most Artists Don't Struggle with Making the Work.
Which is just a great title right off the bat.
Oh, absolutely. And, I want to mention how this source material frames itself because it really sets the mood. They describe their show by saying, and I'm quoting here, "This is a quiet place for the stories and observations behind the work, the parts that aren't always visible in the finished piece."
I mean, that is just a beautiful mission for a show.
Right. And our mission for today's deep dive is to take that source material and really illuminate this very specific, almost entirely invisible disconnect that artists face the exact second their work leaves the safety of their studio.
Because that's where the trouble usually starts, honestly.
It is. So we're going to examine this radical new framework for evaluating your own portfolio. Because the author argues that when creators feel lost, the solution isn't to go searching for deeper meaning or like these grand emotional narratives.
No, it's actually the opposite. Instead, we should be objectively observing the work's behavior.
Which sounds wild, but we'll get into it. But first, I want to drop a thought into your mind right now as we get started. What if the solution to feeling completely stuck in your work or, your projects, your career, whatever it is, what if it isn't to just grind harder to make better work?
Because that's what everyone defaults to, right? Just work harder.
Exactly. But what if the answer is completely changing the physical and mental lens through which you look at what you've already made?
That is the core of it. And, what's fascinating here is that to even begin to understand this behavioral framework, we first have to thoroughly understand the specific problem the author's pointing out.
Right. The invisible gap.
Yes, exactly. We need to look at that invisible gap between the private studio space and the public world.
Because the source makes this foundational observation that really sets the stage. Most people, like the general public, they only ever see finished artwork.
Right, the final product.
Yeah, they see what's complete, what's presented, what is, plated and ready to consume, but they very rarely see how the work is actually read or translated by the world once it leaves the creator's hands.
And the author introduces a concept for this gap that I find incredibly useful. They call it the drift.
The drift. I love that term.
It's so accurate, right? Because the failure point usually isn't in the making of the art itself. Like, an artist can be standing in their studio completely in the flow state, in the zone, and the piece they're painting feels incredibly strong.
Oh, totally. The visual logic is just perfectly clear to them in that moment.
Exactly. It might even be highly consistent across, multiple different canvases they're working on that month. But the moment that work moves outward,
like posting it online or handing it to an art director.
Right. The second it leaves the studio, that crystal clear internal logic just suddenly evaporates. The clarity begins to drift.
And the crucial distinction here, the author makes this really clear, is that the work isn't drifting because it's weak.
No, not at all. It's not poorly executed. It's drifting because it hasn't been seen clearly yet.
Yeah.
Not even by the artists themselves.
Which leads to this maddening internal monologue. I mean, the source text provides these agonizing, universally relatable quotes. It's that horrible feeling of, I know what I'm doing, but I don't quite know how to describe it.
Oh, every creator has felt that.
Right. Or, looking at your own portfolio spread out on a table and just thinking, I don't know what connects all of this. It actually reminds me of a culinary scenario.
Oh, how so?
Well, imagine a Michelin star chef, right? They cook this breathtaking, incredibly complex dish. But the second they step out of the kitchen and walk up to your table, they suddenly can't even tell you what's on the plate. Like the words to describe their own creation just completely fail them.
That would be incredibly jarring. You'd probably question the meal, to be honest, even if it looked and smelled amazing.
Exactly. But, okay, I have to push back on this a little bit. Because if the artist literally created the piece from nothing, using their own hands, their own memories, their own brain, shouldn't they inherently have the language to describe it?
You would think so.
Right. I mean, why does this drift even happen in the first place? How can you physically make something and not know what it is?
It's such a valid question. And this raises an important point because the answer lies really deep in the neuroscience and the psychology of how human beings create versus how we articulate.
Okay, so it's a biological thing.
Yes.
Yes.
The reason this drift happens
Hmm.
is that creation and articulation require two completely different, almost opposed mental muscles. When an artist is deep in that flow state in their studio, they are operating almost entirely on intuition, on implicit memory, and nonverbal problem solving.
Right, they aren't having a spoken conversation with the canvas.
Exactly. They are not thinking in linear sentences like, I will now place a cerulean blue stroke in the upper quadrant to evoke a sense of melancholy.
That would be exhausting.
It would. They're just thinking, this corner needs to feel heavier. This line needs more tension. It is an entirely spatial, visual, and physical language.
It's like muscle memory. And just like muscle memory, it operates entirely outside the language centers of the brain, doesn't it?
Precisely. The artist's intuition works perfectly in the closed, completely nonverbal ecosystem of the studio. But the moment you have to explain it,
Or write an artist statement. Ugh.
right, or curate a portfolio for an outside viewer, suddenly you are forced to translate a complex, nonverbal spatial experience into linear, verbal, analytical language.
You're demanding your brain use a completely different hemisphere.
Yes, outward translation requires a wholly different kind of clarity. And if you haven't practiced that specific translation, you get that freezing sensation, you get the drift.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if an artist is operating purely on spatial instinct, but then judging themselves based on their inability to provide a verbal articulation, well, no wonder they feel like terrible artists.
It's a completely unfair metric,
Yeah. They're probably looking at perfectly good work and thinking it's absolute garbage.
which leads directly to the trap the author identifies next. Because artists feel that drift, and because they lack the language to describe their own work, they drastically misdiagnose the problem.
Ah. They blame the art.
Exactly. They assume the discomfort they feel means the art itself is flawed. The source makes a really bold claim here. A massive percentage of artists are out there trying to solve the completely wrong problem. They think they just need to grind harder and make better art,
So they just keep painting, keep sculpting, keep throwing clay.
just hoping the next piece will magically explain itself.
Wow. And that is the fastest known route to total creative burnout, isn't it?
Oh, without a doubt. The author emphasizes that the art itself may already be incredibly strong. The technical skill is there, the vision is there. What is actually missing is not skill, but clarity.
Okay, clarity of what exactly?
Specifically, clarity of what the work is actually doing, clarity of what keeps repeating across the pieces,
Uh-huh.
and clarity of where the work naturally sits in the wider world.
I see. And without those three pillars of clarity, the source notes this devastating ripple effect. Like everything else in the artist's career becomes exponentially harder.
Everything.
Yeah, talking about the work becomes a nightmare. Positioning it in the market or finding the right gallery, it just feels impossible. And perhaps most dangerously, even deciding what elements to continue or develop in your next piece becomes a total guessing game.
You are effectively flying blind.
It's like writing an incredibly complex, emotional piece of music on a piano, but then trying to judge how good it is by reading the sheet music like a novel.
Yeah.
You're using completely the wrong language to evaluate the work.
That's a perfect analogy.
So, if the problem is verbal translation, the solution must be hiring a professional copywriter, right, or an art critic to write your statements for you. Or maybe the artist just needs to spend a month reading a dictionary to learn better adjectives.
Actually, no. Attempting to force words onto the work is exactly what causes the paralysis in the first place.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The solution isn't adding more vocabulary. It's completely changing the physical way you look at the visual information in front of you.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because since making more work doesn't solve the issue and forcing words onto it doesn't work, the author offers a massive paradigm shift. The source argues that we need to stop starting our analysis from meaning.
Which is huge.
Stop starting from story. Stop starting from emotion.
And for many creators, telling them to ignore emotion feels almost heretical.
Oh, it really does. But instead, the source argues, we need to look at the work's behavior. We need to observe how the work moves. We need to look at how it holds space. Or, perhaps how it intentionally doesn't hold space.
Right, how the physical form is actually built.
Let's break down that terminology for a second, because holding space is a really great concept. When the author talks about observing how a piece holds space, they mean looking at the literal physical presence of the visual elements.
Exactly. Does the subject of the painting take up the entire canvas, pushing against the edges and demanding the viewer's attention?
Or is the subject painted tiny, just tucked away in the lower right corner, surrounded by vast empty canvas.
Yes. So it's a shift from subjective interpretation to objective mechanical observation.
Uh, it reminds me of watching a movie to evaluate the acting or the directing. If you really want to understand the mechanics of a film, turn off the sound.
Oh, interesting. Just watch it on mute.
Yeah, watch the movie on mute. Suddenly you stop worrying about the plot, like the meaning and the story, and you focus entirely on the physical presence, the behaviors.
You notice completely different things.
Right. You notice how an actor holds their shoulders, how the camera lingers on an empty doorway, the literal spacing between two characters in a room. You see the mechanics of the tension without the distraction of the dialogue.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
But I can hear people yelling through their headphones right now, so I want to defend the artist who just spent 80 grueling hours pouring their soul into a painting about their painful divorce or some childhood trauma.
Oh.
Naturally, isn't it completely counterintuitive and maybe even a little insulting to tell an artist to actively ignore the deep emotion or the story of their work? I mean, that emotion is usually the entire reason they made the piece in the first place.
It is entirely counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But that is precisely the mechanism that makes it work.
How so?
Well, when a creator is hyper-focused on the meaning of what they made, they are carrying all of their baggage, their original intentions, their insecurities, their trauma. They're carrying all of that directly into the viewing experience.
So they can't actually see what's in front of them?
Exactly. We are effectively blinded by what we wanted the piece to say. By stepping back and looking purely at the work's objective behavior, its lines, its weight, its composition, its color ratios, we remove the... Yes. The author has been quietly testing and refining a specific method for reading a body of work, and the entire mechanism relies on scale.
The 8 to 10 piece method.
That's the one.
So the source suggests taking a group of pieces and physically laying them out to look at them together all at once, usually 8 to 10 artworks. You don't just look at one masterpiece sitting alone on an easel. You need a larger sample size.
Yes, you have to look at them as a group.
But why that specific number, though? I mean, why not just look at your two favorites?
It comes back to how our brain processes visual data. If you look at one or two pieces, your brain's emotional and narrative centers can easily dominate the experience.
You just get sucked into the story.
Right, you just see the story of those two pieces. But when you lay out 8, 9, or 10 pieces side by side covering a wall or spreading them across the studio floor, you create a cognitive overload for the narrative center.
There's just too much story to process at once.
Exactly. And that overload forces the brain to switch processing modes. It abandons narrative and switches over to pure pattern recognition.
And the cardinal rule of this process, and the author is incredibly strict about this in the text, is that this practice is solely about reflecting back what is already there.
Solely.
It is absolutely, categorically not about interpreting or assigning meaning. It's pure observation of what holds the pieces together and how the work behaves as a collective ecosystem. You are just gathering data.
Across different pieces, maybe made months apart, across different moments in your life, and even completely different subjects.
Yeah.
You are looking for those quiet consistencies.
You are not forcing a pattern to exist just so you can write a clever, marketable artist statement. You are noticing what was already naturally repeating without you ever consciously realizing it.
Right. Let's imagine a mock portfolio to really visualize this.
Okay, let's do it.
Say an artist lays out 10 pieces on their floor. One is a portrait, one is a landscape, one is a still life of some fruit, maybe an abstract piece, totally different subjects.
Completely unrelated.
But as they look at the behavior, they realize that in all 10 pieces, the primary subject matter is pushed slightly off-center to the right, and the light source is always incredibly harsh and originating from the bottom left.
That is a quiet consistency, a recurring physical movement. A specific, repeated way of building form and occupying the physical space of the canvas.
Yes.
But, okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate again here. Because human beings are literal pattern recognition machines. I mean, we look at clouds and see faces. Aren't we biologically wired to immediately assign a story or a meaning to a pattern the literal split second we spot it?
We absolutely are.
So in that mock portfolio, the artist is going to see everything pushed to the right and immediately think, this represents my fear of the future. How on earth do you just observe without interpreting?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of evolutionary psychology, you are highlighting exactly why the author calls this a practice.
Takes work.
It requires immense discipline. Evolutionarily, we are wired for survival, which means we don't just see orange and black stripes in the grass. We instantly assign the meaning. That is a tiger, and I am in danger.
Right. We jump from visual data to narrative meaning in milliseconds because stopping to admire the objective behavior of the stripes gets you eaten.
Precisely.
Okay.
So when you look at those 8 to 10 pieces on your studio floor and you notice a recurring theme of vast, empty, negative space, your brain will instantly want to say, this represents my profound loneliness.
It's automatic.
But the practice is catching that impulse and stopping it. You have to train yourself to say, no, right now it just represents a high ratio of unpainted canvas to painted canvas.
Wow.
By actively resisting the deep biological urge to jump to interpretation, the artist finally gets to see the actual architectural framework of their own art.
They finally see the kitchen instead of just the plated meal.
Yes, exactly. And once you see the objective behavior, it becomes infinitely easier to figure out how to move forward. You understand what connects your work, not in abstract, flowery marketing terms, but in grounded, usable, structural reality.
That is so incredibly freeing. So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Well, the source material ends with a really wonderful open invitation. The author mentions that they're currently opening up this exact behavioral review process to a small number of artists to help further refine the method.
Which is such a cool opportunity.
It is. So
Yeah.
if you're listening to this and you feel like you are in that exact liminal space we've been describing, where the work absolutely exists, you are making the art, but the clarity just isn't quite there, you're welcome to take part. The author notes there's a link in their original show description where you can submit your work for this kind of behavioral observation. It's a highly generous offer. And it really underscores the core philosophy we've been unpacking today. This framework isn't about letting someone else define what your work means. It's simply about having someone help you see what the work is already doing.
Just reflecting it back.
And as the source material so eloquently puts it, sometimes just seeing that behavior is enough to completely change how you move forward in your creative journey.
It really is. And as a quick reminder, if you want to follow the author's journey as they continue to refine this process, or if you just want to explore their previous insights, you can subscribe to the Artist Journal podcast on Substack. It's designed so you can listen at your own pace, and it is a fantastic resource for anyone looking to understand the unseen mechanics of creative work.
Ultimately, it really is about removing the crushing burden of profound meaning so you can actually see the profound reality of what you have managed to build.
I love that. And, we spent this entire deep dive talking about artists, portfolios, studios, and canvases. But I want to leave you with a thought that stretches a bit beyond the art world. Oh, applying it elsewhere.
Yeah. Imagine applying this exact behavior over meaning lens to your own life. Think back to the culinary metaphor we touched on, the chaotic kitchen versus the final plated dish. We're all constantly cooking up our lives, presenting these finished plates to the world and to ourselves.
That's very true.
But what if you took 8 to 10 major decisions or projects or relationship shifts you've navigated over the last year? What if you laid them all out side by side and looked at them purely for their quiet consistencies and their objective behavior?
Without the narrative.
Exactly. Completely stripping away the elaborate emotional stories and justifications you tell yourself about why you made those choices. If you stop asking what your life means and just look at how it behaves, what unseen patterns would you discover about yourself?